Hey, welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction. More importantly, it's about recovery. I'm Casey Scott. That's Dr. Matt Woolley. You're a clinical psychologist.
That's true.
You know how many times a week people phone me or text me wanting to know how they can get in to see Dr. Matt?
No.
I'm 100% serious.
Really?
I think right now the world is in dire need of more therapists. It really is. You said it 2 years ago when we were beginning COVID that the next pandemic or epidemic was going to be mental health. And I think we're starting to see that come true.
Yeah, and I wasn't the only one. That's actually been a national news topic, is the shortage of mental health providers of various, sorts. I'm a psychologist, but, there's psychiatry and there's psychology and there's nursing and there's social work, and all of us are in high demand. I think COVID sort of brought out a lot of issues, whether it was substance abuse or just regular mental health issues and things like that.
Now, normally during the first 10 minutes of the podcast, we kind of check in on my recovery and what's going on. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, I'm kind of just ho-hum right now.
You have that new addiction.
What's the new addiction?
The one that your girlfriend's trying to manage for you?
My hats?
Yes.
Yes.
Josh and I were giving him a hard time off air because every week for like the last couple months, it's a new golf-related hat.
Yeah, and this one's called Sweet Rolls, and they make amazing hats.
They make really cool stuff.
And so much in the fact that in my new TV job that I got, I'm wearing hats all the time. We just got done doing photo shoots, and they were like, "You wearing a hat?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's kind of my deal."
Yeah, and you need to get sponsored for all these hats you're wearing.
I'm a hat guy, and so I wear hats now. And my girlfriend wants to institute this new hat rule, which I'm not a big fan of.
Just the word rule, I don't think either one of us are a big fan of the word rule.
But for every new hat I bring into the house, I've got to relinquish an old hat.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Right now, I bet I got over 70 hats.
Wow.
And they're all up above our closets. And I've kind of taken over the whole top shelf of the closet. And she's bought dividers, and so they're in different colors. And I'm not kidding. And so,
wow.
Yeah. So, like, if I want a white hat, I have to bring down the thing that's got all the white hats. This one's got all the different colors. This one's for working out. This one's for paint. It's...
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe she has a point. I don't know.
And she usually does.
Yeah.
But I'm just kind of ho-hum because life's not... awesome. I mean, it is in some regards.
Yeah.
And it's not terrible. It is in some regards, but I'm just kind of in the middle.
You kind of feel like you're in a rut?
Not a rut, just
cruising?
Just cruising and kind of stagnant. In my recovery, certain things that are going on in my life would have usually been what I thought being helped with, alcohol, but I don't have that. I don't have that escape. So I'm having to actually sit through and work through certain things that are going on in my life. And this is with family matters and, everything that comes into it. Just normal life.
And isn't that interesting that you bring that up? Because that is the allure and the lie of using substances to self-medicate. It's like, oh, I've got all this stressful stuff going on. I'm going to go drink or I'm going to go smoke. But then it makes things worse. But when you don't have it, then you have to deal with it. But, I mean, that's the only way things get better.
Like, looking back in hindsight, with 4 years of sobriety under my belt, I should have probably known this. But I used to get drunk to pay bills.
To deal with the stress of paying the bill.
And I was like, are you kidding me? Because it was like, I don't want to sit down here and write all these checks and all these things. It's just depressing. It doesn't make me feel good. So I'm going to get drunk. So to pay bills was a 6-pack day.
Yeah.
I was like, in my head, I would go to the liquor store or the beer store and go, I'm getting 6 beers because I've got to pay bills today.
And you feel like you need it in order to pay the bills.
Yes.
Yeah.
And mowing the lawn was a 4-beer buzz. I was like, I don't want to mow the lawn, but I guess I'll drink 4 beers and it'll be okay.
Yeah.
And so there's certain things in my life now that I do sober that I used to use alcohol to get me through those.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And I'm getting through them, and it's fine. But like in hindsight, I was like, I probably should have known I had a problem. I had to get drunk to pay bills. But I used to make it as a joke, and you know what I mean? And be like, well, yeah, okay.
Well, part of it is one of the things we talk about in therapy a lot is acceptance, like therapeutic acceptance. Is there are a lot of aspects of life that are just kind of ho-hum,
sucky,
boring, or flat out sucky. Yeah. And actually, by just accepting, you know what? I don't want to mow the lawn, but you know what? I want to have a mowed lawn, so I'll go do. Those kinds of things help us. But when we stay in conflict with them, when we can't accept them, that's when we often turn to substances. Like when you're like, well, I emotionally don't want to have to deal with mowing lawn. I can't emotionally accept doing it, so I'm going to go get my 4 beers. Then I can do it.
Yeah, but then it goes back to what I've really learned in my recovery is perspective.
Yeah.
Because 4 years ago, those same bills were there, and I didn't have the money to pay them all. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now I've got money and I can pay them. So I am now grateful that I have jobs and I have opportunities that give me money that I'm able to pay these bills myself.
Yeah.
I don't have to rely upon family. I don't have to borrow money. I don't have to wait and go. I don't have to play that mental chess game that goes, well, this bill's not a different color, so they're not that serious. If they come in yellow and pink, those are the ones you pay.
That's when you know it's serious.
Because that means the next one, they're cutting it off.
Right.
And so I don't have to play that mental chess. I am now fortunate enough to where I can pay my bills. Mm-hmm. And so I'm grateful for that. So it does.
Life has gotten better.
Yeah. So it's perspective.
Yeah.
But I still, like I was talking with our guest, and we're going to introduce you to him in just a second. His name is Scott. A lot of people in recovery think the ultimate goal is to get sober. And okay.
In a way, it is.
It is.
Sort of, yeah.
But you're getting sober just to get even with everybody else who's doing life sober. And so we've added more on our to-do list than we should have, but now we're here. So now we're getting sober, which is important because if we don't get sober, we can't do all these other things.
Right.
But we still have to do all these other things. You still have to get a job. You still have to deal with your family. You still have to do with your ex. You still have to do with all these things that you have to do.
And that's why I think the ultimate goal is not just sobriety. The ultimate goal is
recovery.
And recovery implies that you're thriving in life. You're doing more and doing better than you did before. But if sobriety is a good goal initially, I think, but then it frees you up to live a life of recovery, which is cool.
But eventually you have to get back in the game.
Yeah.
I've said it before on the podcast a dozen times. I got sober to live. I didn't get sober to hide. And I think there's a lot of people out there that are sober, but they're hiding. And I'm not going to tell them that that's not their recovery because that's not my job to do it.
Everybody's got their own path. But if you find yourself in that position and you're listening to this, you might ask yourself, okay, what's it going to take it to the next level? Do I need some help? Do I need some support? Do I need to visit with a therapist? Do I need to open up and take some chances at a better level of life? Like what did we say when we were kids playing Nintendo? You got to level up, right?
And that's what they say now. You got to level up.
Yeah.
And so that's my ultimate goal is to continually level up.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at. But I noticed that you brought a piece of paper.
Did my homework.
You've got some highlighted areas.
Well, I'm often, throughout the week doing the different things I do, I'm often thinking now about recovery and substance abuse, and I'm noticing the research and I'm noticing things. In fact, I left my downtown clinic this morning, saw some people this morning, jumped in the car. As I was leaving the clinic, there was a pickup truck there in the parking lot, and it's a building that has lots of other people that work in it, not just mental health folks. But so I don't know who this pickup truck belonged to, but I noticed right on the bumper, It said, "I have naloxone in case of overdose." And I thought, you know what, that's awesome.
That is.
Somebody is that dedicated to being helpful to others that they're going to pack it around with them and they're going to put the bumper sticker on their truck. I thought that was pretty cool.
And for those who don't know, naloxone is a life-saving drug that will help people if they're in heroin or opioid overdose.
Yep.
I mean, it's one of those shots that has saved countless lives. And
Right.
if you have somebody in your family that's addicted to opioids or heroin, it benefit you and them to have that on standby.
Well, actually, it made me think I should have that in my car. I don't knowingly have anybody close to me that's struggling with that right now, but you know what? There are people close to me because I work in public. Like there's
and
gotta
downtown.
be, and downtown. There are going to be people around. So I may look into doing that. And maybe I'll let us know how to do that. Like if you want to be somebody, where do you go to get naloxone? I don't really know.
Well, I'm going to throw Josh under the bus right now. When he posts this, he's going to put up a link on there of where you can get it in the community.
Good job, Josh, in advance. Yeah, we got the rock on.
Yep.
Josh. Yeah.
So what's
but
on your-
I have a couple things here. So just real quick, I want you to know that there's real research out there, everybody. There's real research being done by people that are not biased or trying to be as impartial as possible and share
Not
some
selling
things with us.
stuff or
So a couple of thoughts, real quick. Yeah, not selling anything. One is the title of this, and this is from the New England Journal of Medicine, so a very reputable source. Alcohol warning labels need updates to reflect harms. And so basically what this research article is saying is that we haven't updated the warning labels, I didn't realize this, in over 30 years.
Probably right now, all it says is if you're pregnant, do not drink.
That's exactly what they say. And then they say that was, 30 years ago, that was a big push to get people to understand that. So that made sense.
Because of alcohol fetal syndrome. And
yes.
I mean, that was the big push. I mean, I know that because I'm alcoholic and I've studied the bottle because I'm just that guy.
You've read the bottle.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then the only other thing that they typically say is may cause health problems. And what they're saying now when they talk to people about what does the warning label mean to you when they do research, and talk to people, most people hone in on the pregnancy thing and they're like, that's important. Yeah. What is this other part may cause health problems? And what they're finding is it's actually pretty ambiguous. And because it doesn't mean anything specific, it doesn't mean anything specific. So most people overlook it. And so it can actually be misleading where they're like, well, health problems, whatever. It doesn't mean anything. So just like we were very...
The bottle says health problems, but the TV commercial says I'll get hot girls on the volleyball court.
Exactly. And so there's a push to update that. I thought that was actually pretty cool. And then back to one more, because I know we don't want to spend forever on my nerdy interest, but cannabis industry cribs big tobacco's social responsibility initiatives.
Ooh,
and that's from
wordy.
the Journal of American Medical Association.
What does that mean?
So what that means when you crib something, it's like you're taking notes. And so what they're finding is that the cannabis industry is taking notes from what the tobacco industry did 50 years ago. And what they're doing is they are engaging in social responsibility activities, which sounds good. Mm-hmm. And in fact, one of the authors here says that can have some good things, but they're providing things like scholarships and internships, but basically in an effort to look like they're doing all these socially responsible things so that we'll overlook the negative side effects and health problems that are caused by the product that they're selling. And that's exactly, they've actually found that the 10 major cannabis producers in the United States and Canada have directly used the old playbook, if you want to think of it that way, from the tobacco industry, so that we'll overlook any of the negative things that are coming out, including the number one is sponsoring research.
Really?
Yes. And so what you need to understand as a reader is that if you're reading a research article and they don't disclose conflicts of interest at the end of the article, then they're misleading you on purpose. And so just like tobacco industry for many, many years was sort of covertly sponsoring tobacco research.
It was a diet aid or whatever.
Anything. They would kind of bury and mislead the results. The cannabis industry is doing the same thing right now. And so they're really literally following the playbook that we all now know was bogus. Mm-hmm. Like there's been so many lawsuits and things in the tobacco industry, and we know how bogus their propaganda, was, and to some degree still is, but they can't get away with it as well anymore. But nobody's monitoring the cannabis industry, and they're doing the exact same thing. So I just wanted to let you know that if you're reading research, try to find real sources. And I know you love the social media,
yeah,
but a good social media post will have a link to the actual article. And so if it's interesting to you, link in and read it from the Journal of American Medical Association or New England School or Journal of Medicine, those sorts of places that are doing real research. And then at the end, including the article I just said to you, it said you have to disclose if you have conflicts of interest.
All right.
And it said these researchers have no conflicts of interest to disclose with the cannabis industry, meaning they're not getting paid in any way by those folks.
I love it.
But isn't that, I mean, dang it, man. Like you've got to be on your toes because you don't know if what you just read said, oh, cannabis is really good for you. Did you read to the bottom to find out if the people doing research were getting paid by the cannabis people? Because they might be.
When we were kids, one of the coolest guys in the world was the Marlboro Man.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, that guy was
He was like
ultimate-
John Wayne, right?
Yeah, he was cool, the Marble Man. And then even Camel Cigarettes had Joe Camel. It was a cartoon camel smoking cigarettes.
Yeah.
And you're like, that can't be
It
that
was
bad.
promoting, like when we grew up, Westerns, TV shows and movies, the Western, the
Oh, yeah.
cowboy, that was manly, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so, of course, who did they choose as their spokesperson? But basically a John Wayne lookalike.
The Marble Man.
Yeah.
Hey, we thank you, Dr. Matt. I always love it when you bring information because
Sure.
you give us credibility. You are
Well,
our credibility.
I appreciate that. And I just want people to know I'm thinking about it all the time. And so when I find something interesting, I like to bring it in.
I love it. And when I find something interesting, I like to bring it in. Our guest today is Scott Schwarz. He's the road drummer. And you didn't know you've seen him perform before you met him today, but you have.
I have. In fact, when we started talking, today's my first day meeting you technically. But everybody knows that I love Real Salt Lake. We go to all the games. And I realized, I've seen you sitting out in front of the stadium drumming.
He's a street performer. He's been sober for 6 years. Scott, how are you?
I'm doing good. How about you, Casey?
Better than I deserve is my standard answer. And I'm excited for you to stop by and share your story. We're going to hear that in just a few seconds. You're listening to Project Recovery. Hey, welcome back to Project Recovery. I'm Casey Scott. That's Dr. Matt Woolley, our guest today. Scott Schwarz, how you doing?
Doing awesome, man.
People might know you as the road drummer. What does that mean?
It means that I drum on the side of the road.
That's your profession.
That is my profession, yeah.
You're a street performer.
I am a street performer. I perform on buckets and pots and pans on roadsides and outside of venues and stuff like that. So
Now, before we find out how that all came to be, where does this story of Scott begin?
I was born in Lancaster, California. Left Lancaster when I was 8. Don't remember a whole lot about it.
Pretty good childhood, do you think, up to then?
Yeah, definitely. I come from a family of 5, I guess, or 6 of us all together. The last one was born much later, so I didn't get to spend a lot of time growing up with her. But I grew up with the 5 of us, like as a tight unit.
And just to paint the picture for people at home, you're sitting down, but standing up, you are 6'9".
Yes.
So the photo that we take afterwards is going to be really great for Casey and I tower under 6 feet.
Yeah.
So being 6'9", you had to play a lot of basketball.
Oh, no, I never played basketball. I did when I was like in 3rd grade, but I never did it like in high school or anything like that.
How come?
Because I'm a lover, not a fighter.
I like it.
Well, sports are very competitive, and I understand there's a great value in developing like a team mentality and working with a coach and growing in that type of fashion. But I'm just not competitive.
But it's not
at all.
everybody's personality, right?
I like making art and expressing myself and working with other artists and just that type of collaboration versus like a collaboration against another group of people.
Yeah.
So I understand the value of sports. I'm just not. I'm not a fighter.
You're an artist.
Yeah, I'm an artist.
You're an artist.
I'm one of those. I'm one of those
did that
wimps.
mess with your identity as a kid? Because a lot of people probably just saw you and was like, you have to play basketball, and you don't. Did that mess with your identity at all, or were you pretty confident in who you were and what you loved?
Oh, no, I was a teenager. I didn't know anything about who I was. And there were all sorts of things that were pulling me in different directions, trying to make me become what they wanted me to be. I was raised LDS, for example, and like that was pulling me to try to be that type of guy. And I had, just as the eldest child too, I had a bunch of things pulling me, trying to make me something that I'm not. So there were all sorts of things that were trying to convince me to be, whether it be a basketball player or.
Where did art fit in growing up? Being an artist, music, art, were those things encouraged at all?
Oh yeah, certainly. My mom was very encouraging of us growing up with art. She would have art days, and we had like a gallery when I was a Boy Scout too. Like we made a bunch of paintings and set up a gallery and stuff. So my mother in particular was very, very supportive of all the arts, and my dad is too. He's not an artist per se himself, though. He's definitely got much more of a
Analytical,
utilitarian mind. Like, what purpose does this serve? But he still tremendously values the arts and stuff like that. And he paid for my piano lessons and for my sister's piano lessons and all of their art stuff. So he definitely supports it too. So I felt very fortunate to come from that type of. I have a great family.
So you didn't have, like sometimes, so I've spoken to, in the course of my 20 years being a psychologist, I've spoken with a lot of really tall guys in therapy who felt like if they weren't inclined to sports like basketball, that created conflict sometimes with their dad or with friends. And it sounds like your parents were more just kind of open and supportive of the things that you were inclined towards, like the arts.
Yeah, there was definitely pressure from them to focus on, doing really well in school so that I can go, get a scholarship for college, et cetera, and stuff like that. So they definitely pressured me in a variety of ways. But no, they were still supportive of the arts, for sure.
Well, that's good.
At what age did alcohol enter into your life?
It was after I left the house. So
So a pretty normal childhood, high school experience and all that?
pretty normal, yeah. I left my family, though, in like a bit of a tornado. I was pretty upset. I'd primarily blame testosterone because I'm a new, everyone's upset at their parents at some point. But I was also like very just frustrated with a variety of components of the way I was raised. We'll say that, and I won't go into the details of it. But like when I left the family, I was in a really stressful space of mind.
So with it, I realize you may not want to talk about some of the details, and that's totally fine. However, we have an audience here in Utah that's pretty familiar with the LDS Church, of course, and there are a lot of great things about a very structured religious upbringing, but part of it can be, there's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things. And when you're an adolescent, your mindset is a little bit more natural about being open. Like, well, maybe I want to do things a little differently. Maybe I want to explore things my own way or have questions and go in a direction that can make parents nervous because you're not necessarily adhering to exactly the standards that they're teaching. And so I don't know if that's kind of what you're alluding to, but sometimes a person feels like it's too constraining when you're 17 and 18 and you're like, I want to do things my way.
Certainly. I definitely do not like to be controlled. And that still has lasted throughout all of into my adult years. It's kind of embarrassing, honestly, because sometimes I'm told to do something, just no. And it's like, well, you're 38 now. You should probably do what you're told if they have the appropriate authority.
Casey, you and I don't ever feel that way, do we?
You're saying that, and I'm still. It's just like that's the thing that made me such a great alcoholic.
Yeah. You can't tell me what to do.
Yeah, this is my body. I can do what I want. Who are you? I don't tell you what to do. You don't tell me what to do, and we won't have a problem.
Exactly. And when I hit 18, finally I had legal autonomy. And so like I got out of the house as quickly as I could and engaged in autonomy for the first time. I felt like I could make my own decisions. I thought I could make my own choices. I could hang out with who I wanted to. And I felt free. And I actually didn't get into alcohol immediately as soon as I got out. I did move in and live with a bunch of people who drank, but the residue, I guess, of being LDS maintained. I felt actually kind of cool that I wasn't drinking and everyone else was drinking.
You were a little different.
Like it was different and stuff like that. But
I can still hang with you and I don't need to do this.
Yeah, exactly. And that made me, because I was different from everybody else, that made me feel cooler, especially at 18, what is cool with you is uncool to me. And I was uncool before it was cool to be uncool. You know what I'm saying?
I think you just summed up every teenager's mindset right there.
Yeah. So, after, being alcohol free and living on my own for a couple of years, I finally did give into it. And it was actually marijuana that I did first. I wasn't addicted in the beginning. It was a social type thing. I was living with a bunch of, when I left the house, I wanted to be a musician since I was a little kid. I loved Michael Jackson and that was what I always imagined myself being. And when I finally got out of the house and got away from this idea of like, I need to get like a salary job someplace as an electronic engineer.
Yeah.
And I could pursue my dreams. I was like, okay, I got to pursue my dreams. I'm going to be a musician. So I was living with guys who were into punk rock music, heavy metal and stuff like that. And they were getting wasted all the time too. But I wasn't with them. But sure enough, after, like I said, 2 years, if I finally smoked weed off of a bet. There's literally a video of me where everyone's chanting my name, Scott, as I'm trying to take a hit off of a bong.
Your first one.
Yeah, my first time, and I didn't pull it off. But that was the beginning. And I would drink occasionally for a couple of years while I was doing the music thing. So I started a record label. I set up a recording studio inside my garage, and I had bands coming through there. And again, I would drink every once in a while, but it was not.
Your
was very
energy
social.
level that you have in this room right now does not surprise me that the first thing he did was set up his own record label. Like, I mean, he's all
what's funny
in.
is
You're all
like,
in, right?
I realized, because what I really wanted to do was like to be a singer, you know?
Yeah.
But I kind of realized as I was going through the music scene that all bands break up, all of them.
Yeah.
All bands fail. Except like the 0.1100%. So I realized that in order for me to be successful in this industry, I need to give up on this dream of being a lead singer in a band. I need to just get behind the mixing board. And that's going to provide me, and then I'll be able to work with lots of bands. I'll be able to, you know, I could rely, it was just seemed like a safer bet, you know, but it's still the music industry. So the record label failed. I had a couple of bands leave, and there was just a whole bunch of things.
Was that here in Salt Lake?
No, that was actually out in Eugene, Oregon.
Okay.
So when I left my parents' place, I moved up to Eugene, Oregon with the bands. That failed. And I moved back in with my parents for a year. And that's when the alcoholism actually began. This might be the first time they hear this, but I got a job at Albertsons, and I went back to school. I was like, okay, music's not going to work. I'm going to just give up on my dreams. And and the alcoholism kicked in. That was the first time I drank alone. I'll never forget the first time I drank alone. It was at Albertsons. I was working at the gas station. I'd walk behind the Albertsons, and there was a really traumatic event that happened that day related to the record label finally failing. And I bought a 40 inside of Albertsons, went behind it and pounded it. And then went back and worked at the gas station. It was the first time I drank alone, and that was when it began. Because then after that, it wasn't about drinking with other people. It was about like getting wasted before I saw other people, or getting wasted before I went to other places. And it was just like, that was when it was alone.
Well, you
like,
said a key thing, which is pretty heavy. You said, I decided to give up on my dream of being a musician.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that give up, people don't really realize if you mean it.
Oh, I did. I meant it.
That's a heavy burden when you realize you're giving up on something important.
Especially something that you had as a little kid. I still remember like dancing to Michael Jackson's music and like looking at my shadow and thinking I was really cool as my shadow was dancing along the wall, and like just like that core memory from like 6 or 7 or whatever it was. Like that was like, it's one of my earliest memories, was trying to like,
and so that was
making music.
So that was music. Part of you. And we've talked a lot on this show about identity development, and people develop, you know, through our childhood, especially older childhood and adolescence, we're developing a sense of who we are. Casey, I would say, was a class clown and comedian way back when, right? And those sorts of things, the way we think about ourselves, become part of who we are. Giving up on that is giving up on part of yourself.
Yeah.
So much the fact that you remember the day you first drank alone. You said it's burned into your brain, and it's a vivid image.
Oh, yeah. I remember looking at the traffic. I remember certain cars going by, actually. Like there was a red sedan that went by twice, and I remember thinking, like, do they know I'm doing this? You know?
We're going to find out more about that. You're listening to Project Recovery. Welcome back to Project Recovery. I'm Casey Scott. That's Dr. Matt Woolley, our guest today, Scott Schwarz. He's the road drummer. And you've been telling us a story about the first time you said that you believed alcoholism really began.
Yeah.
You've given up on your dreams. You're powering a 40 behind a grocery store.
Yep.
You remember a red car going past you a couple of times, wondering if they know what you're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a vivid. That's very,
very vivid.
Yeah.
And so at that point, you said you started drinking alone before you went out and met people, because it wasn't like a social thing. It was almost a motivator to go out and do things. Is that right?
It was a motivator to go out and do things. And it was really just a coping mechanism. There was always an excuse to drink. There was, someone's coming over, or I need to do work. You were talking earlier about
getting drunk
before you pay the bills, or drunk to mow the lawn.
Right.
I mowed the lawn drunk so many times. And again, it was a way to make it like fun. It's like, oh, I don't want to mow. Oh, I'll have 4, 5, and then I would be out there mowing the lawn and finally getting the chores done. But yeah, it was once I started drinking alone, there was no excuse that was unavailable to me. I could make plenty of excuses inside my brain, especially because it was all inside my brain. I never, tried to justify my drinking to anybody else. If I'm just the only one sitting in there talking to myself and saying like, oh, this is a good reason to drink. Oh, this is a good reason to drink. There's no other voice inside my head that's saying like,
this is probably not a good idea.
yeah, it's probably not a good idea. You shouldn't be doing this. Or like, why are you, what a waste of time or waste of money, et cetera, et cetera.
There was no counter argument.
There was no counter argument for a very, very
preaching
long
to
time.
the choir.
Yeah.
So at this point, do you ever get married? Where are you at in your life now?
So after the alcoholism began in Medford, Oregon, I moved up to Portland, Oregon, where it got significantly worse. I moved in with a couple of guys who were also drinkers. And I was, I guess, what they call a functioning alcoholic. I held down a job. I paid my rent. I would go home and get trashed every single night. Eventually I started moving around. I was moving around from job to job, not because I was losing jobs to my alcoholism. It was because the jobs would get in the way of my alcoholism. I didn't realize this until speaking to a friend just a few nights ago, actually, about it, that we would try to find jobs that would allow us to get trashed every single night and then, be able to wake up.
Still be able to go to work. Yeah.
And what's crazy is now that I'm sober, or not now that I'm sober, but once I got sober, I started getting much better jobs because I wasn't looking for things that would just allow me to
Phone it in.
Phone it in, exactly, yeah. And then, I got a girlfriend. We were together for about 5 years. Was
she a drinker?
No. And what's ironic is actually I've never dated a woman who drank or smoked or did drugs. During my time as an addict, I was always attracted to women who were sober. Yeah.
Why do you think?
Shockingly, they dated me. I don't know why. What it was probably the bad boy complex.
Well, you're tall, handsome, and a drummer. So come on. Give me a break.
Well, at that time, I wasn't a drummer, actually.
Yeah. Well, but why do you think you were attracted? That's an interesting thing because you just got done saying, I never, you didn't have to justify your drinking to anyone, so it would kind of make sense to date somebody else who was drinking. You wouldn't have, but now you're dating women who don't drink. It sounds to me sort of counterintuitive. Why do you think you were attracted to them?
Well, in therapy, I realized that I'm attracted to unhealthy women. Now, just because they weren't drinking doesn't mean that they were healthy, mentally healthy.
Definitely, that's true. Yeah.
So there were. I don't want to go into too much detail because it might reveal who they are or anything like that. But they definitely struggled, with
so
their own things and
other
stuff
things.
like that.
Yeah.
Okay. But they were amazing women, all of them. They were right to leave me. They deserve so much better. And I hope that wherever they are, they are.
How do you feel like your drinking affected your relationships with women?
I lied because I wasn't. How do I put this? I lied about my drinking all the time, particularly to the last one, because I acknowledged that I had a drinking problem to her while we were dating before it had actually really, solidified into a relationship. So she knew about it, but then I would just lie to her about whether I had drank that night or not, or like where I had gone or any of that.
How much
I
you drank.
lied so much to that poor girl. Not about our relationship. I never cheated on her or anything like that, but specifically with drinking, all the time. And I still feel guilt about that to this day.
But that's the
that
pattern, right?
Much.
Like lying about substance abuse and addiction, it protects it. It allows you to keep doing it, or at least you think it does, right?
Yeah. And you think that they don't know, but she knew. Yeah. We were in a codependent relationship, so she tolerated my behavior. And
maybe that's why dating the unhealthy women was attractive, because if you could have that codependence,
they would tolerate
your bad behavior.
Let me ask you this. As you were lying to them, were you also lying to yourself?
Oh, of course. Yeah. The depravity of the lies that I would tell.
I'm with you. I know.
And what I didn't realize until a therapist pointed this out to me is I would actually spend quite a bit of time thinking about them. Like before I would tell a lie, or I was heading to a destination where people were like asking what I had been up to or what I had done or anything like that. On my way there, I would be concocting this elaborate story that was, tried to be fantastical about it and like include some elements of like surprise and wonder, and like I was becoming like a really good storyteller to a degree. But it was all lies, and it was again, I'm not proud of it. I'm honest now in the sense that I'm honest about my lying. But like you become so deluded and delusional that you begin to believe your own lies. So that when people call you out on it, it's kind of like, well, wait a second. No, that actually happened, and you've processed it so much that it's actually become real. You may even experience some of the trauma of some of those stories that you make up.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah, I've never experienced the trauma of the lies I've made up before, but I know I have family members who have said like, I've just thought about this horrible event potentially happening to me enough, like a rape, that now I'm experiencing PTSD of having experienced it because I've thought about it so much,
Isn't that a great illustration of how powerful our mind is?
Yeah.
And it can be powerful in a negative way, or it can be powerful in a positive way. But we've talked on the show a lot about the pattern, thoughts, feelings, behaviors. How we think about things influences and determines how we feel and what we do. And so if you are deep, deep, deep into this fantasy world of lies and creating these elaborate stories in order to protect your ability to abuse alcohol or whatever, you can see how you emotionally can't avoid being affected by your own mental process of this story. So.
Yeah, and I like what you said too, where if you're thinking about it enough, it doesn't. You said it. The feelings become real. And I forgot how you said it, but like what I wanted to add was it becomes a reality. In your mind, your lies
becomes
are
your reality.
real, you know, and it's very. When I was doing outpatient, there were some things that were just so deeply ingrained that I honestly thought I was telling the truth when I'd be saying those things. But then, like my therapist, she just slapped me around enough until it finally came out as what reality actually was. And what a burden to be free from.
Oh, 100%.
Because when I got out of rehab, I was so excited. I was telling everyone that I was a recovering addict. My mom actually called me once. She's like, you should probably not be telling everyone that you were struggling with alcohol because, you know, there's a stigma that's associated with it. And I would tell my employers before I would, you know, or at a job interview, yeah, I got rehab. But
Casey's
it was just
done
because
that.
I had this.
that.
But the thing is, you know, too, you just have this enormous burden lifted off you. I spent hours alone every single day drinking. And now that was gone. And I didn't have to hide that from anyone. And I can just dance around in the street, feel, yeah, I'm a recovering alcoholic, and just like have all all those lies lifted up and just be like, yeah, I was stoked.
Before we get you dancing around and celebrating your recovery, how do you get into recovery?
Well, so that girl dumped me. We were living together at the time, so I also lost my housing. I also lost my the vehicle I was in, and shortly before she dumped me, I lost my job. So, like in a matter of one day, I lost what some people might consider everything. I had an acoustic guitar strapped to my back, and I'm wandering around, and that's supposed to be rock bottom. Nope, I can keep on digging. So I digged for a lot longer. I moved in with my friend, and then I moved in with my sister, and then while I was living with her, I got suicidal. And what we spoke about this before the podcast, and there's a long story which I'll give to you of how I got into recovery, and then the short story. And the short story is just one word: it's humility. I finally got humble enough to ask for help. And the process of getting there was once I'd lost everything and I'd moved in with my sister. I was living in the garage. It was the winter. It was freezing cold. I had a really crummy job, and but thankfully the job was mindless. I was working in a fishing rod manufacturing facility, and so I could put on headphones and I started listening to self-help because I wanted to run my own program, as they say in recovery. It was like, so I listened to a bunch of books about quitting alcoholism. I listened to a lot of Tony Robbins, of course, and like other self-help people, and like it just, none of it was working. I started listening to a podcast called The Recovery Elevator, and that podcast changed my life. And that's also why I'm so thankful that you guys do what you do. You may not realize it, and the guy that runs the Recovery Elevator podcast doesn't know it, But he saved my life. And what you guys are doing is saving lives, and you just don't realize it, because not everyone's going to come up and have the opportunity to thank you. So I want to call out the recovery elevator. I see you, bro. I'll reach out to you soon and let you know. But what he told a story on his podcast about his recovery process, and he called his dad to see if his dad would put him into a rehab facility. And when he told the story, his dad didn't answer, but he knew that when he tried to call his dad, that he was ready to do the right steps. So he put himself into a recovery facility and stuff. And I heard that story, and it touched me in such a way that like I got trashed, and I called my dad. He picked up though. And I just told him, look, I'm an alcoholic. It's like, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. it kind of put all the pieces together, because I think I managed to hide it from them, not perfectly, but they probably didn't they didn't know the depths of it.
Yeah.
So I called them and I said, look, put me in a rehab facility. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll do whatever you tell me. I'm not going to, fight, because as I mentioned before, I have my own strong personality. I want to do what I want to do. I want to, I want to be told what to do or controlled or anything like that. But I had gotten to the point where I was humble enough to be like, I will do whatever I'm told. Send me wherever I need to go. I will follow whatever program I'm told to follow. I am tired of this. I can't do it anymore. And it was a few days before days after a suicide attempt, actually. And, my dad was like, yeah, I'm on it. He called up my cousin, who is Cameron Jensen. He's married to Annie Jordanson of Annie's House. And
oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and so my dad was able to contact, I forget.
Ty Hansen.
Or it wasn't Ty Hansen first, actually. It was Annie's dad.
Okay, yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. And he and my dad talked, and they got me into Steps Recovery Center in Payson. And that was the beginning. I did 90 days in there. I got a before I went in, I found online the FAA's 10 steps for a successful recovery. And I saw that, and I was like, I'm going to do everything that's on this list. And one of them was 90 days in a inpatient, 90 days outpatient, a year of drug testing. And they had like just these 10 steps, and I followed every single one of them on there. And
how long ago was that you went in?
January 1st, 2017. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, New Year's Day. Yeah, my lovely sister hopped on a plane with me and took me out here, and I stayed out here since. Because I was coming from, she was living in Washington at that time,
So you get sober, you do the 10 steps the FAA recommends.
Yeah.
FFA probably approves of it too.
I think so.
Yeah. I think it's the Federal Aviation Administration.
I was thinking of Future Farmers of America, because I'm from Morgan.
But you get sober, and how does that lead you to being a street performer? Most people would think, or I think at least, is that a street performer is probably not that conducive to a sober lifestyle.
Yeah. I can.
I mean, if you've ever been to Vegas and walked on Fremont Street and seen the performers, I don't think a lot of sobriety is going on there.
No, there's not. I've been down to Las Vegas, and it's a party.
How do you become the road drummer?
So when I got out of rehab, so I guess it starts a little bit further back. So I'll give a little bit of preliminary. I saw bucket drummers in Portland, Oregon, 2003, May 5th was the first time I saw someone performing on a bucket in Portland. And we drove by them, and I was just fascinated. I thought it was the coolest thing. At that time, I was running the record label and stuff, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. Then several years later, while I was still in my addiction and my life is falling apart, relationship's about to end, I stole a construction bucket while wasted from a construction site, and found some sticks that were on the site to just branches and started going at it. And that was my first time really trying it. And then I didn't touch it for a long time. When I got out of rehab, I was like, I've always wanted to learn to play the buckets.
Mm-hmm.
Right now is a perfect time. Why not now? Why now? Well, why
Right,
not
right.
now? You
Why
know, it's
not
like
now?
I've been waiting all this time. I'm in my 30s now, and I'm just getting out sober and stuff like that. Let's do it right now. But I was also too embarrassed to perform or play on the buckets in public or anything like that, just because I had no experience. And I've sat at a real drum set maybe 4 or 5 times.
So that wasn't your main instrument growing up?
Piano was my main instrument,
okay.
yeah. And then I played a little bit of clarinet and saxophone. So what I did is I strapped the bucket to the front of my bicycle onto the handlebars. And I learned to ride my bike without using my hands, but to drum on the
So you're
bucket.
riding around drumming on your
Riding
bike.
around drumming, yeah, because then that allowed me to like practice as I was going back and forth to inpatient, actually, or not inpatient, outpatient.
Outpatient, IOP.
Because when I got out of rehab, I had nothing. I had like a backpack.
You
and a
just
bunch of
destroyed
notebooks.
every kid's excuse. I don't have time to practice my instrument.
There's always ways to
Because
do it.
you're
Yeah,
drumming as you're riding to IOP.
yeah. And I did that for like 2 years, actually. I got a real job working at a place called Server Plus, making instructional design stuff. And like, but as I would go back and forth to work, when I got out of rehab, I had nothing. So I didn't have a car or anything like that. And I just rode my bike and practiced playing the drums. And then I lost my job at Server Plus. And I just kept playing the buckets. One day I sat down outside out of frustration. Actually, a friend of mine from rehab had overdosed and died. And I was really, really frustrated. I was still dirt poor, and my bike tire was flat. So I just sat down next to my van and started performing on the ground for the first time, actually. And people started approaching me while I was sitting out in the parking lot doing that, watching me and like, oh, that's really cool. And they started trying to pay me money. And I was just like, I still had that punk rock ethos of like, oh, you can't give me money for making art. That's selling out, blah, blah, and stuff like that. So, but what was amazing when I first did it and people just started approaching me is they started dancing. And that moves me. When people dance, to me, that's that's a physical expression of joy, and now that's my goal every time I go out and I play is to get people to dance. So I played a couple of times. I was still looking for a real job though, and then the pandemic hit. And so I couldn't find a real job, even if I wanted to.
Nobody was hiring.
Yeah, no one was hiring or anything like that. So it was like, well, I guess I've got these buckets. I'll just keep on playing. So I'd set up on the side of roads and stuff like that and just bucket drum. And what was really fun about it, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, is you guys remember everyone was on super high stress alert. You couldn't get close to people that you loved even. Like it was an incredibly difficult time for a lot of people. And what was great about going out and performing on the side of the road is like I could provide people a concert.
Yeah.
And they would stop and they'd watch me just going at it and having a blast for like 30 seconds and then go through the red light. And like I would get people writing to me like, you've made my day. You know, thank you for spreading joy and smiles. And like people were just responding to it so positively in the very beginning because they were all
needing it.
Yeah, exactly. They needed some, and I know you've seen me perform before.
I have,
I'm
more than once.
I'm giving tons and tons of energy. I'm grinning from ear to ear. I'm engaging the audience.
You
I'm
can't
trying
ignore
to talk to
you
them.
when you walk
Yeah,
by.
yeah,
6'9".
Yeah,
I'm trying to,
6'9".
yeah.
But what you're saying is so true. It's not just that you're out there drumming, and it's not that you're drumming. I mean, it's amazing. That's a side note. But it's your energy that you have in the studio today.
Yeah, I mean, it's very infectious.
Oh, thank you.
And so you're out there, and how did this become a job for you? I mean, so I guess people want to start paying you.
Yeah, that was actually the funny thing. Like in the beginning, I didn't have any tip buckets out or anything like that. And when people would try to pay me, I actually saw it as a nuisance. It was because when I saw street performers, I never thought of them as making any money. I just assumed that they didn't make any money. I would tip street performers and stuff, but like I assumed that like, oh,
Couple of bucks, right?
Yeah. It wasn't going to actually go anywhere or anything like that. But for me, what I realized, and you know this as working with other musicians and stuff like that, is musicians are lazy. They're incredibly lazy, and I am not. So I go out and perform every single day for hours at a time, drumming, which is like running in place. And so it's hard, heavy work. But that's, when people think of most street performers probably make nothing unless they're in Las Vegas and they've got like a bunch of people with money walking by them. But like most of the musicians that I know who do street performances, they want to play their own music, which no one wants to hear. I'm sorry, that sucks. I had to hear it too, but no one wants to hear your own original music.
Yeah.
So play songs that, people are familiar with, and then they're more likely to tip you.
Right.
Most musicians they're not out there to entertain people. They're out there to express themselves, which is fine. If you want to make art to express yourself, don't expect anyone to pay you unless you make something that is really, really unique.
Yeah.
When I go out to entertain people. That is my goal. I want to see people smile and dance. I literally have a mission statement written on the ceiling of my van. So every time when I wake up and I see it, make them smile, make them dance. That's the goal. So I think that that's what distinguishes me from other street performers who aren't able to make a living doing it is A, I work every single day. I work hard as a drummer. And B, I focus on what the audience wants rather than what I want to do as an artist. And it was kind of a unique transition to make too, because as an artist, you always want to express yourself. That's kind of why I got into it. Mm-hmm. But I've actually learned to find more joy in bringing joy to others. And when I do write music, because I still write music and stuff like that, I try to write it in a fashion that is meant to connect with someone else, rather than saying what I feel or what I need or how I'm doing or anything like that. I want to make you happy, or I want to touch you in a specific way. And I guess that'd be the third thing is there's less selfishness in what I do. Most musicians are incredibly selfish. You can too. I'm speaking to the DJ. Like we're not the best people. We're late. We're never like. I noticed that you had me come here 45 minutes early, and I came 30 minutes before the 45. Yeah. But most musicians, I'm sure they would have arrived at 11:30 or whatever.
Like
but
doctors.
like musicians, they just
like
don't.
Doctors.
I think that's what really has allowed me though to do it full time. Though is I'm relentless.
Yeah.
I love the fact
I believe
and your energy is amazing, but I do want to take a moment to figure out what worked well in your recovery. What really sunk in? Is it meditation? Is it 12-step? What made you think that you could do this? Because normally there's something that you goes like, okay, I got this.
Yeah.
Was there something that really stands still that helps you stay sober?
I am not a victim. It's probably the biggest realization. There's a couple of them. Like I said, humility was a big thing, realizing that, learning how to get outside my comfort zone. But really the biggest thing was just realizing I'm not a victim. In my addiction, I was convinced that, not that everyone was out to get me, but everyone was not interested in me doing well, or that they would no, I guess it was out to get me. Now that I think about it, like it's definitely the victimhood mentality is so powerful and so present. It's one of those things where so we've all been victims.
Yeah, we've all been wronged.
We've all had people steal from us, lie to us, cheat, all those different things.
Sure.
But the difference between being victimized and being a victim is a victim has a mentality. So I've been victimized, and then I would take that and I would hold on to that victimhood and just continue to allow that to modify my behavior in different things. So a really simple example would be I asked a girl out, and she said no. And poor sad me, no girl's ever going to like me. I'm never going to ask anyone out ever again. So I become this victim of rejection, and then I begin to live inside that and just
which is a really attractive quality, sarcasm, because
girls love that.
Girls love that. So it creates that self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
I think that what you're describing is very true, that, back, not to beat a dead horse, but thoughts, feelings, behaviors, right? Mm-hmm. So how you think about things influences how you feel and what you do. It becomes who you are, it becomes your reality. And so you're absolutely right that there's a huge difference between being victimized and having a victim mentality. It becomes who you are, and other people sense it, and they do start to treat you that way.
Yeah, yeah. And so like coming out of that mentality of victimhood, just before I checked into rehab, I wrote a statement that I'll always remember. And it was because I was like journaling before I went in. You are responsible for everything that happens to you. Responsibility is not the same as blame.
Right.
But responsibility dictates who is in charge of what happens next. So yes, I've been victimized, but that is my responsibility to deal with that. Does that make sense? Like just because something happens to me, I can still blame someone else for that, but it is up to me to behave a certain way. Like if someone calls me a name, I still have the choice of, addressing them or ignoring them.
Let me take a wild guess here. Ooh. When you were in that victim mindset,
he called it victimhood.
Oh,
either way, yeah.
When you were in that mindset, when that was kind of how you were living life, you were probably consumed with this idea of fairness. Things aren't fair. This isn't fair. Things should happen better. Once you broke out of that, it was responsibility. We're not hung up on fair anymore. We're just dealing with, well, it's my responsibility. I have to take care of this. But it's interesting that when we get hung up on what's fair, it's easy to sink into that victimhood.
Yeah. And I never heard of it put that way too, I guess it was about fairness. And what's greatly ironic about that though too, is like, just because I was upset about things not being fair doesn't mean that I didn't think I was above the system or that I could do things that were unfair. You know what I'm saying? Like, so even though I was being victimized or in that victimhood mindset, I would still victimize other people through my lies and stuff like
your
that.
ego, right?
Yeah, through the ego and stuff. So it was the great irony is that you are upset that everyone's not behaving a certain way, but you're behaving differently than they are. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? It was just the fairness. I'd never heard it put that way. That's really insightful.
The narcissism of what you're describing is, it trips
exactly
us
what
up,
it is.
right?
Yeah. That was another thing that I had to realize too.
I love
is that
Scott
I was a narcissist.
because you can say something that hurts and he laughs at it. You're like, you're right.
Oh yeah, well that's the thing, dude. Like it's not. I'm incredibly durable now. That's what has made my recovery. And like there's all sorts of things that happen to you in your life that will discourage you or prevent you from chasing your dreams, but you just got to laugh at it. You really have to, because life isn't fair. You're not a victim, and it's your responsibility to make your dreams come true.
Ah, well said.
I love it.
Let me take one other observation.
Oh, yeah, totally.
And you tell me if you think I'm okay with being told I'm wrong. But it seems to me like there's a direct correlation between giving up on your artist self and re-embracing your artist self.
Yeah. And
it seems to me like alcoholism happened in between those 2 points in your life. Would you say that's true?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And so we said, Casey said this 1,000 times, everybody's recovery looks different. It sounds to me like one key element of your recovery has been re-embracing the artist that you are, because you not only lit up but got emotional when you told the story about making other people dance.
Yeah.
And that harkens back to your story of dancing to Michael Jackson as a little kid, right? And so those connections, that was I could tell, you mentioned Michael Jackson. We've only been talking for an hour, and you've mentioned dancing as Michael Jackson twice in that hour.
It's a clear memory,
Yeah, a clear and powerful memory. And then you got emotional that first time that somebody stopped and was really connecting and enjoying that music with you and dancing themselves. And so in between those two things, that's where your story went off the rails. That's when the alcoholism happened. And it's interesting, in psychology, we often talk about the power of art, and going way back to someone like Carl Jung, the psychoanalyst, who talked about an artist, whether it's a visual art, a story, music, you put yourself into that. And when somebody else comes along and they connect with that art you created, you're connecting with them, even if it's across time and space. Mm-hmm. Most of the art that we consume, we're never going to meet that artist, right?
Yeah.
Bono and I keep writing him letters, but he still doesn't want to hang out. But when you connect with art, you connect with the artist. It's a very personal thing, even if it's across time and space, even if you never physically are around that person. And I can tell that you, as an artist, by re-embracing that ability to connect with people, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm guessing that's a huge part of your ongoing recovery.
Definitely, yeah.
We've said it on the podcast before, the opposite of addiction isn't abstinence, it's connection. And it sounds like your art gives you a way to connect with others, that gives you a community. You said before, and maybe this was on or off the podcast, but literally you'll have 20,000 people walk past you drumming.
Yeah.
And, you know what I mean? And they don't know who you are and you don't know who they are.
But I see him smile. I see him.
But you're connected to him. Yeah.
I can tell you, the last time that I went out sometimes I go out the other entrance, but the last time I went out the main entrance and I was with my girlfriend, Ashley, and as we were walking by and we stopped and watched you for a little bit and then we kept going, and her comment was, man, he seems like he's having fun.
Yeah, I am. I love what I do. It gives me a sense of purpose. You were talking about, the opposite of addiction is connection. I think that that's true, but I also think that for me, it was more about purpose. Mm-hmm. It was more about having a purpose to go out and to serve others. In my addiction, I was woefully selfish. Everything I was doing was about me. And what was ironic is when I was just sitting there serving myself, whether it be through drinking or, a variety of other things, like I wasn't happy. But now I go out and I don't do much for myself. I mean, I feed myself, but like my entire existence is wrapped around trying to entertain people and making them smile. That is my purpose. So I've modified my entire life. I live out of my van so that I can travel around and set up at different places and not have to worry about finding a hotel or anything like that. And I can just travel around, set up, make people smile and leave. And that gives me so much sense of purpose. I've had so many people write to me and I've inspired so many kids to play the drums. I feel bad for all the parents that I've done that to. But it gives me purpose and it allows me to connect with people for sure. I think that the connection that you're referring to though, it's deeper,
Oh yeah. No, it is.
Than like a connection that I make with someone who I'm performing for who may dance or smile at me, versus a connection with someone like what we're having right now, which is much deeper, much more substantive. We have similar experiences and stuff like that we're sharing back and forth with that, and we are connecting on a very deep and emotional level. And that is the opposite of addiction.
And I'm so glad you stopped by and let us have this connection.
Yeah. I think you may be the most well-spoken drummer I've ever met. I mean, he describes this. You've described your experience and your thoughts so clearly. I hope people are really taking note of what you said today.
And we will put videos of him drumming up on our Facebook and Instagram and social and ways to get a hold of him, because I think your drumming is really just going to take you to the next level, and I can't wait to see what happens.
Oh, thank you so much, Casey. I really appreciate it.
Hey, you've been listening to Project Recovery, and in case you forgot, Project Recovery is what?
It's a KSL podcast, Casey.
Give me a drum beat, Scott.
I like to keep it simple.
I know, I got it.
I don't want to confuse anyone.
Is that a paradiddle?
No, I think that was just 5 hand slaps. There you go. He's got the paradiddle.
I got it.
We got to get you guys together.